Good afternoon.
Good morning, Mr. Krasovskyi. My name is Ted Zarzechny, and I will be chairing this session of interviews. Let me introduce to you my colleagues on the Selection Commission. They are Robert Brookhuizen, Yevgen Mizentsev, Stephen Markman, Sergei Verlanov, and who is missing is Ivan Mischenko. Ivan Mischenko, for the record, has recused himself from this interview. I want to welcome you, sir, to this stage of our Selection Commission's proceedings, the personal interview of the candidates. I should mention to you that if there is any difficulty with the technology, our connection is interrupted or otherwise, don't be worried about that. We will have our staff contact you again, and we will make arrangements as we can to reconnect you. And if that is not possible, then we will contact you to reschedule the interview, and we will continue from the point that we left off. I'm going to encourage you, sir, as we do with all candidates, to try and keep your answers on point and concise. And that will give us an opportunity, each of the members of the commission, to ask the questions that they have prepared to ask you. We have two rapporteurs of your interview today. They are Yevgen Mizentsev and Robert Brookhuizen, and you see them now to my side. What we do is we provide Mr. Krasovskyi, each candidate with an opportunity to present a 4 or 5 minute introduction of themselves, as well as your motivation for participating in this competition. And so let me now turn to you, sir, and I will, however, leave you in the hands of my good colleague, Yevgen Mizentsev, and he will lead you through this process. Yevgen?
Thank you, Dad. Доброго дня, пане Константине.
Good morning, Konstantin. If I may, I will make a short introduction. I will introduce you as a lawyer, and after that, you will be given the floor for your introductory remarks. So, Konstantin Krasovskyi was born in 1971. He has the general experience of working in the field of law of 30 years and experience as a lawyer of over 20 years. Mr. Krasovskyi graduated from the National Law Academy named after Yaroslav Mudry in 1998, and he graduated from the National Academy of State Governance in 2008. He has a PhD in law, which he got in 2021. He is a figure well known in the legal community of Ukraine. He is a teacher at the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. And at the same time, he is an expert of several international projects and international organizations, including USAID, Pravo Justice, Justice for All, EU OSCE projects. In addition, he worked on the Commission for the Highest Staff of Government. He participated at the administration of the President of Ukraine. In between 2011 and 2014, he was member of the board of Transparency International Ukraine. He also worked at the Constitutional Commission. He has a certificate proving his level of fluency of the Ukrainian language of the second level. And it should be added that with regards to property status of Mr. Krasovskyi, NSCP has no concerns, there are no corruption risks. This is if we are being very brief. Now I'm passing the floor to you, Mr.
Yes,
Krasovskyi.
and excuse me.
Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Mr. Yazentsev. And I now will turn the matter over to Mr. Bruckheisen. But the floor is yours, Mr. Krasovskyi.
Well, thank you. Good morning, dear commissioners, dear members of the Selection Commission. I'm Konstantin Krasovskyi, and I'm trying to become a member of HQCJ. Some information about me. I was born in Kharkiv. I graduated from the National Academy of Law, named after Yaroslav Mudry, with a degree in law. I also graduated from Syracuse University in the US, getting a master's degree in public administration. I believe that the majority of my professional activities as a lawyer, to this or that extent, is connected to the activities of courts, selection, qualification assessment, the judiciary reform, initiation and implementation of constitutional amendments to legislation. And this may be confirmed by the following. I started my professional activities in the court. For 4 years, I worked as a secretary of the judicial panel in Zhytomyr Region Court and in military tribunal in the same region. As a lawyer, as a part of a law firm, I represented the interests of my clients in court, specializing in commercial cases, defending the interests of Ukrainian and foreign companies. I also worked at one of the departments representing the interests of the Ministry of Justice in court. And I was representing the interests of Ukraine in a number of court cases. I'm proud of myself and my team participating in the case Generation Ukraine versus Ukraine. The sum of claim was $9.5 billion. The freeing of Ukrainian planes in Canada. Plus, I have the international experience which I gained during studies and internship at the Syracuse University and at the Office of the Solicitor General in Great Britain, where I learned the issues of the judiciary. I have been and I am an expert of a number of projects, including Pravo Justice, Council of Europe projects, and USAID projects. For 5 years, I was head of the main department of policy at the administration of the President of Ukraine and was the secretary for judiciary reform, where I was immediately involved in initiating amendments to the Constitution and current legislation, the relaunch of the Supreme Court of Ukraine and the High Anti-Corruption Court. I have accumulated a number of innovations pertaining to the judiciary reform of Ukraine. And finally, I have the immediate experience involved with qualification assessment, not only of judges, but also of prosecutors. In my opinion, the judicial reform started in 2016 should be completed on the most important level, human level. A judge that is honest, impartial, and worthy is an integral component of a worthy judiciary system. We have this great demand from our society, the demand for justice. And I hope that the selection of HQCJ will be able to change the paradigm in the judiciary, create a judiciary of a new caliber. I believe that we now have this unique window of opportunity to change the very essence of Ukrainian judiciary. I'm convinced that my knowledge, skills, and experience will contribute to these transformations. I remember the year 2006, Warsaw, participation in the seminar on the restoration of democratic institutions. of a country which had serious geopolitical and security challenges. And during that event, we were able to work out and model a successful situation in which a country achieved sustainable development. And at that time, I could not even imagine how relevant my knowledge would be at this very moment. So it was a theoretical model that we were working on, but we realized that it was Ukraine that we were modeling, the country that we were doing that model for. In general, the activities of HQCJ, in my relevant experience, will also include my knowledge of English language and my knowledge of qualification assessment. Thank you.
Я перепрошую, пане Костянтине, у вас
I'm sorry, Kostiantyn. I'm sorry, but we can see your moniker,
принаймні половина.
your call sign in the military. People will be able to see that. Maybe you need to take it off for security reasons.
Okay. Mr. Krasovskyi, when I look at your biography, I see someone who has been involved in judiciary, change of the judiciary, even since, I believe, possibly 2011, when you became a board member of Transparency International. Okay, can you tell us how someone who had a career as a lawyer working for White & Case, not the most, let's say, environment for judicial change, I would say, and who used to work for a trader, I believe, in oil in London, to become someone who wanted the judiciary in Ukraine to change? Because that's quite a career, isn't it? Coming from White & Case and then becoming a changer of the judiciary.
Дякую за запитання.
Thank you for this question.
Пане Роберте,
Thank you for the question, Robert.
говоримо про судову реформу.
When we are talking about the reform of the judiciary,
При обговоренні говорять, що
during the discussions of this reform, we always say that there has been some achievement in the reform, meaning two selections, one to the Supreme Court of Ukraine and one to the High Anti-Corruption Court of Ukraine.
відбувається якась незавершеність.
But I think that there is some sense of incompletion, and it's felt in the conversations about the judiciary reform, that the judiciary reform has not been completed, and I want to be a part of this process. I want to be someone who contributes to its completion. If we look at the historical perspective,
Вона відбулась на рівні конституційному.
then we had this reform on the level of the constitution, on the level of legislation, and even on institutional level.
Тільки розпочалася
But
на самому головному
we only started the most important level of this reform, the human level.
розуміння.
And there the understanding should be much wider. It's about the quality of judges. It's about the perceptions of the court and the judiciary by the public. And this is exactly the stage in which I would like to be involved. Thank you.
Okay. But my question was, how did it happen that you, working first as a lawyer with White & Case in the US, working in London in a commodity company, became a reformer of justice?
Ну, якщо подивитися мою біографію,
If you look at my autobiography, you will see that in 2001 I joined public service. In 2003 I became head of the Department of the Ministry of Justice. I was representing the interests of the ministry in foreign jurisdictions. It was a new department, a new area of work, and a new challenge that Ukraine was facing as a country in view of it being a signatory to agreements on investment. In my opinion, back then, that involvement in public service convinced me that my calling was not just to be a lawyer, but also it was about public service. And after my internship, as you mentioned correctly, after my internship in the UK, I realized that I needed to get a degree in a foreign country. That's why I got my master's in public administration at the School of Citizenship and Public Affairs in the United States. I'm proud of this degree, and I see myself on the border between a lawyer and a public administrator. That is why being involved in reforms is part of my profession, is part of my training, is part of something that I'd like to do.
In March 2019, if I'm well informed, you applied for the position of member of the High Council of Justice under the President's quota, but you were not appointed. This time you did not submit your candidacy for the HCJ. Why not? Is this not a job that, especially for someone like you, is, let's say, designed for you? Or?
Я не розумію, під мене розроблено.
Ні, чому в цей раз
Але-
не використали
але-
можливість піти до ВРП?
Ну, я почув викладки, я вже про це, що я бачу самим головним.
Well, let me explain what I see as the most important final stage in the judiciary, and that is the human dimension.
Кадрове наповнення.
It's about selection of staff for the judiciary.
Ну, по-перше, я знаходжусь зараз в Збройних силах.
Well, I'm currently serving in the armed forces of Ukraine, and I'm defending Ukraine
Я почув
as a military man, but when I heard the announcement for this selection that you are even urging military men to apply,
було приємно, і я зрозумів,
it was really pleasant for me, and I understood that I could use the experience that I have
для наповнення кадрового.
in this very area that I mentioned, the selection of staff for the judiciary. Thank you.
But I do not see from your biography that you have real experience in selecting people. Or am I mistaken?
Мені не вказано, я був членом
I was a member of attestation commission
16 атестаційної комісії.
of the 16th Cassation Staff Commission for the attestation of prosecutors of regional prosecutors' offices, and also it was the attestation commission for the attestation of local level prosecutors.
Комісії питань вищого корпусу.
And I was also a member of the commission on the selection of public servants of category A.
На своїй роботі я завжди займався
And
людей
as a person, I was always selecting staff,
в департаменті.
both for the department representing the interests of this state while working in the Ministry of Justice. Thank you.
And do you believe that this selection that the HQCJ has to do, that the present rules and regulations are sufficient, or should there be other methods that should be used to select the proper people? Because even though there have been many rules and regulations implemented in Ukraine, there are still issues inside judiciary, but also outside judiciary, with all kind of problems like corruption. What is your view on that?
Відповідь на ваше питання, вона
The answer to your question may be very lengthy,
відповідаючи на таке
because while answering a question like that,
бачити
I can tell you about the vision I have for the development of the judiciary and the correct procedures that we have to apply in order to select worthy staff.
If you do it in short.
я якраз і повертаюся коротко.
Yes, I will try to be brief. Thank you. Because we are under the circumstances that we have.
Після суддів
The HQCJ is appointed for 4 years, so it will start operating 3 or 4 months
кваліфікаційної комісії, вона приступить до
after all the members have been selected. And in 3.5 years, we will again be facing the issue of selecting new HQCJ. We are bound by those procedures that we already have in the legislation. If we are going to be amending the legislation, we will find ourselves in the same trap that we found ourselves in 2019 and 2020 when the Commission stopped its work.
відповідаючи на ваше питання, треба шукати резерв.
In order to answer your question, I will say the following. We need to find the reserves within the existing procedures. Thank you.
Okay, I will pass the floor to my friend Yevgen Metsentsev.
Окей, thank you, sir. Пане Костянтине, дивіться, є інформація про те,
Konstantin,
що
we have this information
з такого собі засобу масової інформації, яка
from
називається
a
«Україна
mass media outlet, Criminal Ukraine. An article was published in this outlet saying that you had some connections with a politician, Mr. Filatov, working in the administration of the president at the time. Could you please comment,
вказаний факт, зазначений в цьому засобі інформації.
provide an explanation about this allegation? We are not saying that this information has been verified, but we do have it.
Інформація є, вона реально відома.
Yes, it's public knowledge. Mr. Filatov was the deputy head of the administration of the president in charge of the legal and judiciary reform.
Головного департаменту правових політик. Подало
So I was part of that department. So your relationship was a working one.
кінці 90-х.
And not really. In late 90s, we also were acquainted.
У вас є намір
In your motivational letter, you also state that you want to give this new impetus
апеляційних судів.
to the development of appellate courts. So you are making an emphasis on appellate courts. So what did you mean by that, and what kind of impetus would you like to give to appellate courts?
Ну, якщо ми подивимося на досвід добору
If we look at the
в Верховний суд,
selection to the Supreme Court of Ukraine and selection to the High Anti-Corruption Court of Ukraine,
суду спрацювала та ідея,
the idea about fresh blood, academics and lawyers worked. And at the Supreme Court, the idea of involving judges of different levels of courts, it worked. It introduced new ideas, new forms of work. Since the appellate courts are becoming the key link in the judiciary, I do believe that completion of selection for appellate court judges should become a priority for the new HQCJ. Thank you.
Ви маєте на увазі великі
Well, I got the idea that maybe you meant vacancies, a big number of vacancies in appellate courts.
Це так, але
Yes, I also meant that, and this is what I'm emphasizing. We need to fill in the vacancies for the appellate courts because that was the ideology behind the reform.
зазначити, створити новий Верховний суд,
To create a new Supreme Court
нові крові прийти,
and give new people an opportunity, people from trial courts, academics and lawyers, give them an opportunity to join appellate courts. And after that, we can slowly deal with selection for trial courts, so that the appellate courts have complete staff because their decisions become effective immediately.
вивчаючи ваш мотиваційний лист,
While studying and reviewing your motivational letter, plus from the information that we've received from outside sources, we see that in March of 2016,
що деяка
you filed a statement with the police with regards to Ms. Kostiantynova giving you a call on your private phone, saying that she transferred a sum of money to some strangers in order to solve the issue of her son being employed at the administration of the president, and allegedly
влаштувати її сина.
she was expecting that you would help her with the employment of her son. Could you please explain the circumstances of the case and what was the final decision, because we don't have all the details?
дякую. 3
Thank you. On March the 3rd of 2016, as mentioned in the materials that I'm aware of, I did receive a phone call.
я не знаю, вона
I didn't know that person.
невідома.
I don't know her actual name.
Я повинен
And she told me that I was supposed to employ her son.
такої інформації не знав.
I knew nothing about that fact, and she also told me about giving some money to some strangers, so I immediately reported to the police. I don't know what the results of the case are, so you were not following the proceedings, you were not following
Я повідомив
the developments. Well, I reported to the police, but the police did not inform me about anything, so you did not get a procedural status within that case? No.
З вами говорити наступне. Ми
Well, thank you.
приділяємо деяку увагу, не деяку,
We pay
істотну увагу
significant attention
питанням наявності потенційного
to the issues of availability of conflict of interest.
хотів до вас питати.
So in this context, I have this question.
Рекомендації
One of the people who provided a reference letter for you to participate in this selection is another candidate. I will not be naming this candidate. How do you think? Can it be a potential conflict of interest since both of you are participating in this election?
прихованої допомоги
And can this be seen as some kind of hidden help to the other candidate in order for them to be appointed as an HQCJ member? Thank you for this question. I don't think this is some kind of hidden help.
колеги після того, як
I asked my colleague for a reference
роз'яснення,
after
оскільки
I read the explanations of the selection commission.
в Збройних силах
Because I'm serving in the armed forces, I could not find other people who could provide me a reference. So you have provided us with all the reference letters. I understand that, but
людей, які могли
several people who could have provided a reference letter, I could not reach them.
була в тому, що
And since it was in the regulations, it was in the explanation of the selection commission that it's possible for other candidates to provide references, let's not name this person who provided a reference for me. But if I were to answer your question, I don't think it's a conflict of interest,
людина, вона створює собі фактично конкурент.
because
Тому
it's creating competition for yourself.
якраз конфлікт інтересів, тому що
It's not a conflict of interest.
і не давати цю рекомендацію.
A person may refuse to provide the reference for you,
Під небезпекою того, що буде ще один конкурент.
because in this way they will be creating competition for themselves. Yes, in this respect, I agree with you. It's the right of the person to provide a reference. And it's a nice gesture. Yes, that's what I'm telling you about, and I'm really grateful to the person who provided a reference for me. Konstantin, in your declaration for the year 2021, you mentioned that your wife and you have 21 securities each. We are checking the connections of the beneficiaries, and according to your control with regards to the company in which you have some shares, there are some concerns. So this company is in the process of termination. There are some issues about its bankruptcy or liquidation related to this company in this or that way. It has to do with the company where you have shares. It's not about you or your wife. So how did you acquire those shares in the company?
Я і моя дружина є
It's really true that me and my wife are the owners of 21 shares
від публічного акціонерного
of this
товариства.
public joint stock company, the Scientific and Design Institute, blah, blah, blah. Let me not mention the whole name. And the face value, if I'm not mistaken, is 5 hryvnias, 25 kopecks. We got those shares in the middle of the 90s during the privatization process. And these shares, well, I considered that their face or their market value is, well, almost zero, or maybe we can consider that it's even negative. Well, negative is dubious. Anyway, this is the share. Yes, but it's close to zero. So this means that you didn't have any relationship with the company. No.
Мені здається, що ми
It seems to me that we haven't even lost those shares physically. I don't know where they are, and I'm not using them. Okay, thank you, clear. Let me give the floor to my colleague, Judge Verlanov. Serhiy, you're welcome. Yes, Konstantin, good afternoon. I'm Serhiy Verlanov, and I will have a couple of questions to you. In a motivation letter, you declare that you have participated in the development of some basic regulatory acts related to the judiciary, and you have been involved in the development of the concept of qualification assessment and new approaches to selection of judges. That has actually led to the situation when people from beyond the system have managed to get into it. What do you think now? Would the system of assessment for judicial candidates or incumbent judges require any amendments and changes?
дякую за запитання.
Thank you for the question. Well, yes.
Оскільки у нас вже є історія,
Since we have already got a certain story, we have the history of how things have been done, we can see how selection and qualification assessment have been performed. And
обговорювалися
back then, the processes were just discussed and the norms were being established. There was no clear vision, but now we can already make some conclusions on the basis of those procedures. And if you ask me about their exact specific changes, is that what you're asking about? Yes. Yes, try to be more specific. I think that we need to
скоротити час.
shorten the timeline
Рахунок більш ефективного
due to improvement of specific procedures. I think that the system has proven to be resilient. It really provides good results. As we can see, But anyway, it's possible to still improve the procedures. And the problem of timeline, as I think, is one of the most urgent ones. Clear? The next question is as follows. You also indicate that you were involved in the implementation of the wider public engagement to the judicial selection. What do you think about the current reality, about public engagement and about interaction between the High Qualifications Commission of Judges and Public Integrity Council? Does this cooperation need to be improved, or is it enough to have what has already been developed? Thank you for the question. When we speak about civil society engagement, we need to mention that Ukraine has a very unique institution like the Public Integrity Council. I think that we should stop discussing whether this is necessary or not, and whether we need the Public Integrity Council or not. Of course, we do need the Public Integrity Council. This is the institution that presents the information, and that is the voice of the civil society in general in the quasi-judicial process, where it performs the function of a quasi-prosecutor by way of providing information about facts or any other information related to the judge. And the judge can actually also present his information and advocate his interests. And the HQCJ has to take into account this information and has to pass a well-balanced decision. This is the system that has also proven to be efficient. Moreover, the PIC has the right of veto, which is also an efficient mechanism for avoiding appointment of judges who are not men of integrity. I think that as far as improvements are concerned, for me it would be most important to make the improvements within the triangle I have just mentioned, and to improve the communication between the PIC and the HQCJ, not to make the communication between these two institutions overcomplicated, not to have any imbalance in their cooperation. Thank you. Here is the next question. Let's assume that you are appointed a member of the HQCJ and you have started performing your professional duties, your functional duties. What would be the first steps, the priorities to pay attention to right now in the current reality in Ukraine to launch the functioning of the judiciary? What needs to be done first of all? That's what I've mentioned. We have a very short period of time. We have about 3.5 years for those procedures. First of all, I think that we need to compile a plan, an action plan for the HQCJ. And the Commission should follow this plan within the short time interval. Because if we don't have a plan, if we don't have the clear understanding of where we're moving, it will be difficult to do a high-quality job and to really meet all the challenges and needs of the society. Also, let me mention that it's important to create within the coordination body within the judiciary, the coordination body for cooperation between the state judicial administration, PIC, HQCJ, Committee of Legal Policy, civil society, research, academic community, lawyers, attorneys, and their community. I think that this mechanism of coordination, if it is well balanced, will help us solve the problems and will tell us what our priorities should be. And as far as the operation of the HQCJ is concerned, we need to very quickly complete the qualification assessment. That is the requirement of the Constitution under paragraph 16 of the transitional provisions of the Constitution. And the HQCJ should perform this function as soon as possible. Thank you. Your answer is clear. Let me give the floor to my colleague, Judge Markman. Stephen, you're welcome.
Thank you, Judge Verlanov. You have asked many of my questions. Mr. Krasovskyi, looking at Ukraine from about 2014 to 2019, I don't see any more important figure on issues of judicial reform than yourself. You were clearly one of the great leaders of that time. And this commission is considering whether to install you in a position in which you will again be a great leader on that issue. Let me ask you, though, what lessons have you learned from your first experience? I know there was much good that was done, but you say that judicial reform was not completed. Of course, it's a very difficult thing to complete. But what are you going to do differently to try to move things forward? Were there mistakes made? Were there things that should have been done that weren't done? Were there things that you regret not having done? I don't ask these questions to suggest that you didn't do everything you could in a position of leadership to provide that leadership. I just wonder if you have any thoughts as you've considered things since that time. You said to yourself, maybe we should have done this, or maybe we should have done that. If only we had done this, if only we had done that. Are there any things like that cross your mind that you think would be helpful in moving this process further along as quickly as we possibly can?
Thank you for the question. I see even two things here. Well, even two questions. What did I learn as a result? And what the mistakes are and what I would have done differently, right? Can I consider your question to be two questions?
I think that's a good summary. Thank you.
Well, concerning what I've learned, I may say that a good plan constitutes a precondition of success and progress. Well-prepared plan and development of this coordination mechanism that will help us develop this plan and that will help us bring this plan into life constitutes the precondition of success in any reform. And the council and judicial reform has played its role because it's developed the strategy of the reform of the judiciary and related legal institutions in 2015, and the process continued up till 2020 on the basis of the strategy. And I know that now the new strategy has been prepared 2020-2023. And the system of the judiciary in general is now facing the issue of seeing what lies in front of us, where we are moving. That is what I have learned. I have learned that a good plan is the precondition of success. Concerning mistakes and changes, it seems to me that qualification assessment should have been quicker. Maybe it was necessary to apply some other options. For example, back then we were thinking about the so-called cascade qualification assessment, with the HQCJ being assessed by the Supreme Court, and together with the Supreme Court, all those who have passed their qualification assessment assess in panels the judges of appellate courts, while the appellate courts make assessment of trial courts. So this is a cascade, and the civil society representatives could also be involved into those panels. It seems to me that this formula would have yielded a quicker result. We would have saved some time. And in spite of the fact that Ukraine is a large country, but I think that in the future, if we apply such creative approaches, our country will become not a big, large country, but a great country.
I'd like to ask you a question similar to what my colleague, Judge Verlanov, just asked you a few minutes ago. If we appoint you to the High Qualifications Commission, I think we're clearly appointing a leader to that commission. You will bring great authority and a great history of leadership to that position. On your first day, as you gather together with your new colleagues, what will be your first priority? What will be your first exercise of leadership on the part of the new High Qualifications Commission? What is the first mission that must be accomplished? What is your priority? You will not just be one of 16. You will be a leader, I would predict.
Well, the priorities are qualification assessment to complete it as soon as possible, and also clear determination of the number of judges we need in Ukraine, because this staff shortage issue and the issue of filling the vacancies are the burning issues. So to solve them, we need to determine how many vacancies we need to fill and how many judges the system needs in general. And the scope of our workload will also depend on that, on those calculations, because, sometimes we tend to forget that now we must have selection not for the courts we currently have. We need to complete the process of establishment of the new judiciary, new final courts, new end courts following the new administrative division of Ukraine.
You've been through this experience on this commission for the past year, Mr. Krasovskyi. We're trying to do our best to get the right people on the commission, leaders of all types, backgrounds, approaches. Are we doing well? Has this process been a good process for you? Are we identifying? Do you think it's a process that has the potential to identify the best of the best to serve on this important commission for Ukraine? What has been your experience?
I like the approach of the selection commission since it is divided into stages. It is clearly split into the stages, and you are using the time very efficiently. So I agree with the approach. I think it's a useful approach. And when I was submitting my documents and people started asking me for how long are you going to be involved in the competition, I made some predictions and stated that most probably there will be some interviews at the beginning of February or mid-February. And the selection commission is even better and more efficient in terms of time, so it's January. So I cannot tell that I have any reservations. No, I have something to learn from this commission.
Well, on your let me ask you again about your first day on the commission. as you look around you and you see your colleagues and you see the people that you're going to be working with as a team to try to elevate the judiciary of Ukraine, what kind of people would you like to see there? I'm not asking about any names. I don't want you to name any names, but what kind of people should this commission look for to share your mission and to serve with you on this commission? Are there any suggestions that you might have as to their qualities or backgrounds or strengths or how they should mix with each other as a team? As a possible team leader, as I suggested a few moments ago, what kind of team should we put together for this commission to succeed? It's got to succeed. We can't have constant reforms. There have been reforms for a long time in Ukraine, as you know. But to succeed finally, to complete judicial reform, to use your term, what kind of team members do you need with you?
Дякую за запитання.
Thank you for the question.
Цікаве.
It's an interesting question
Вміння впрацювати
because the ability to work in a team is actually one of the most important skills for people sharing the same values, the same vision of new Ukraine and new quality of the judiciary. But to answer your question on whom I would find it good to work with within the HQCJ, or let me rephrase it, probably I put it in the wrong way, with whom we could get the results. These should be people with creative thinking, people who are out of the box, and who can suggest some solutions that are not obvious, but that could be relied on and that could be implemented within the system that we have in order to achieve the result, which would be higher, which would even surpass the expectations, exceed the expectations. On the one hand, I think that it would be good if you focused on the candidates who have good soft skills. Soft skills matter. And of course, they should have knowledge in the field of law, but besides that, they should be able to somehow apply this law and to apply their soft skills. That's it. So the ability to work in a team plus the skills I have figured out now.
Well, thank you very much. There's so much we could discuss with you. We only have limited time, but of course, we wish you the best on your current team as well. Thank you very much.
The opportunity comes finally to me to ask some questions. One of the disadvantages of being last, although we may have a second round as well, is that most of the questions that I have had and prepared have already been asked by my colleagues, but I do have the benefit, on the other hand, of your answers to some of those questions, and I may follow up with further questions. However, let me begin with an observation and invite you to respond. When I looked at your biography and your motivation letter, together with all of the other information that we have collected with respect to you and all other candidates, I came to the conclusion, Mr. Krasovskyi, that your expertise, if you like, and your main contribution with respect to judicial reform, perhaps the 2016 judicial reforms, was as a policymaker and advisor. You tell us that you were involved in constitutional amendments, you were involved in fundamental changes to the system of holding public office, as you say, judicial office, with the High Anti-Corruption Court and the Supreme Court of Ukraine nomination and selection process. So those were policy positions and at a very high level. Now you're looking for a job on the High Qualification Commission. And I call that a boots on the ground, shoes and feet on the ground responsibility. What do you say in terms of the question, why are you interested now in not continuing your policy role, but rather implementation of some of those policies and structures and responsibilities that the HQCJ is involved in its day-to-day work?
Thank you for the question. Well, since I have the experience and I also know from practice not just how to develop policy, but how to apply these policies, how to bring these policies into life. Here, I mean, I experience of working in the Ministry of Justice when a new department was established with new tasks, new assignments. The policy was developed, and then we had to do the implementation part. So that was almost the same situation. As you have mentioned, I was first developed in the development of the policy, and then I had to implement it. And the same concerns this aspect of my life. I've been dealing with policy and strategy, and now I want to implement those policies into practice.
All right. I suspected that kind of an answer. Let me move on to perhaps a few specifics. You say in your motivation letter that as part of the reforms, particularly applied to the High Anti-Corruption Court and the Supreme Court selection process, that you enabled lawyers and academics from outside the system to hold judicial office. And that is a significant departure from the status quo and a significant new initiative. How has that worked out?
Well, I think that this really worked. It worked out, and this new fresh blood in the Supreme Court actually makes the whole system transparent. It does not allow the Supreme Court to be closed from all the other institutions of the state. And researchers and lawyers and attorneys, and I would also include here, if we speak about the Supreme Court, I would also include here not judges of appellate instances, but trial court judges. They are also present in the Supreme Court, and presence of those people in the Supreme Court has led to the new quality of the Supreme Court. So it really worked out.
Now, let me build on that answer, if I may. Would you also be in favor, or do you see the possibility of taking a similar approach to the appellate courts and perhaps even courts of first instance?
For appellate courts, it's also possible. But the point is that the selection procedures have not yet taken place, and the previous composition of the High Qualifications Commission of Judges just launched the processes and did not complete them. But this is envisaged for appellate courts, and this is the idea of having new, fresh blood in the judiciary, new values and new people.
I see. One other recent, although I suspect you were also involved on a policy level with this new approach, and that is the involvement and appointment of internationals in the judicial selection process. I think particularly, of course, of the High Anti-Corruption Court, and now, of course, not just with a court, but the selection of the HQCJ, our selection commission. What is your view about the role and involvement of internationals with respect to judicial reform?
Thank you for the question. I think that it's possible for internationals to be involved in procedures and in judicial reform. It's possible to have them in the selection commission, in the ethics council, and generally any selection commission for judges. While working in the presidential administration, I witnessed establishment of the commission for selecting judges of the Constitutional Court, and it was for the first time that Hanna Prokotko, the honorary president of the Venice Commission, was an international expert, and she was the chairperson of that commission. Also, I would like to mention that while seeing the discussion that we had on the involvement of international experts in the work of the auxiliary bodies, selection bodies, so I was addressed by one of the projects concerning my opinion about the constitutionality of such involvement. And I, as an expert in constitutional law and the theory of state and law, should say that there are no bans, no prohibitions for involvement of internationals in such work fixed in the Constitution. The Constitution does not prohibit it. And this is the opinion I've been advocating, and I will keep advocating.
That actually invites me to ask the next question that I had intended to ask. We're, I think, quite familiar now with your views as a policy advisor in the last administration. But then you also report in your biography that you have been involved for almost the last 2 years, 2020 and 2021, with projects for the OSCE, the Council of Europe, Pravo Justice, the European Association, and USAID New Justice. Can you tell us a little bit about the projects you were involved with and the relevance that those projects may have to the work of the High Qualification Commission of Judges?
Thank you for the question. For USAID New Justice project, I've been shaping up this opinion about the constitutionality of the involvement of internationals in auxiliary bodies dealing with selection procedures, in particular for the HQCJ and the High Council of Justice. And well, if we speak about the projects that have something to do with the judiciary and the court reform concern, I would say that I was a facilitator in the development of the strategy
займався розробкою
one of the strategies, and I also dealt with the development of, together with other experts within the Pravo Justice Project.
курсу
That was development of a course
Національної школи суддів
for the National School of Judges related to writing legal decisions. I also had to deal with the report on the discretion and the algorithm of judicial actions and decisions made in administrative bodies. And for many years, I've been the lecturer
літньої школи
of the summer school
конституційного права
on constitutional law,
розповідає
where I keep telling about the methodology of constitutional changes, amendments to the constitutions,
децентралізації.
and I focus on the constitutional amendments related to changes in the judiciary and decentralization. And generally, I'm interested in a lot of such projects.
Оцінці впливу децентралізації
It has been of interest for me to participate in the reform as in the report on the assessment of decentralization in some of the regions, in particular Zakarpattia regions, because it shows how the reform really affects the life of people. And when you see the results
політики, які розробляють.
of this, that is when you see the results of the strategies and policies you have been developing.
Thank you. Our commission process has evolved to the point where we are encouraged to ask as many questions in the first round as we have. However, I do intend to provide my colleagues with the opportunity for a second round of questions, if any. So I will firstly turn to our principal rapporteur, Mr. Broekhuizen. Do you have any further questions?
No, thank you.
But I have.
Mr. Mezentsev, not surprisingly, has a further question.
Thank you, sir. Пане Константине, ми
So, dear Konstantin,
це питання декілька днів тому з одним
we discussed this question several days ago with one of the candidates.
яка дійсно підтримує
For you as a person
розширення повноважень
who is indeed supporting the expansion of the mandate of PIC, who supports the existence of this body as a control body, it will not come as a surprise that the HCJ has adopted amendments to the anti-corruption strategy for the 3 years to come. And according to this concept, there is this rule according to which a negative opinion provided by PIC can be overcome by HQCJ during a joint meeting of HQCJ and PIC with a regular majority of votes. So it means that the PIC, the majority of PIC members, need to vote against their own negative opinion with regards to facts that they have collected with regards to this or that government official or judge. In your opinion, do you believe this to be a progressive, effective way of control? And is it going to result in the diminishing of the role of HQCJ in this election?
Дякую за запитання.
Thank you for the question.
На мій погляд, ця концепція
In my opinion, this concept has proven its efficiency
конкурсів вищих
during the selection procedure to the High Anti-Corruption Court, the joint meetings of HQCJ and PIC.
розуміємо, що є менша складова, ніж
But we understand that there is another component to this, not just the PIC. We need to look at the procedure for the formation of PIC. We need to look
державну функцію на це перейти.
into ways
Такий механізм
for us not to have a PIC that will assume too much responsibility. So in general, you share the concept, yes or no? But it's up to a more careful selection. of PIC members. Yes, as a concept, I think it's quite feasible and it has proven its efficiency.
До вас, як до людини, яка звикла
Thank you.
міркувати
You, as a person who's used to think in global
категоріями,
categories of statehood,
питання теж глобального плану.
I would like to ask you this very global question, a question of a global scale. Maybe somebody is going to ask me why I'm trying to get each candidate to answer this question. I believe that corruption is not really the specialization of HQCJ. At the moment, we are trying to create an open society. We are trying to create open relations between the society and the judiciary, and that is why we need to talk about corruption. And I have this question for you.
Чергового
Right now, against the background of new corruption scandals that emerged several days ago in Ukraine, regardless of whether it's peace or war in Ukraine, but we still have our regular corruption scandals.
було, окрім існуючих
In your opinion, in addition to the existing approaches and concepts,
неприпинення, а нарадше попередження.
what are the measures that we could implement not to stop but rather to prevent corruption, not just in the judiciary, but in Ukraine in general?
Перепрошую за себе. В країнах Скандинавії чи інших
Is there any tool that is used in Scandinavian countries or other countries with zero tolerance for corruption? What can we borrow from their experience so that we can prevent corruption in Ukraine,
цінних проявів
to decrease the level of corruption in government authorities in general? Thank you for this question. I think it's tax declarations for all citizens of the country. Yes.
Але це буде потребувати надмірного
Yes, but it will require for an ACP to increase their workload significantly.
Всі плітки, я пропоную.
I'm talking about tax declarations. I'm saying that every citizen of Ukraine must report on their expenses and income.
зрозуміло. Щодо витрат, ви
That's
не
clear.
будете пропонувати це застосовувати у загальному.
So, as far as expenses are concerned, you will not be
Зрозуміло, дякую.
talking about applying this to all of the citizens of Ukraine. That's clear. Okay.
Anything further, Judge Berlanov? No. Judge Markman? No. Mr. Brookhuizen?
No, thank you.
A third round?
No, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a very interesting conversation, Mr. Krasovskyi, and we thank you for making yourself available in challenging circumstances. As we do with all candidates, sir, I will now give you the last word. If there are any areas that you feel would be helpful for us to hear about, any aspects of your motivation or anything arising out of the questions that we asked, now is the opportunity we give you to respond and or add anything that you wish. The floor is yours.
Шановні члени конкурсної комісії,
Dear members of the Selection Commission,
перемогу України
I believe in the victory of Ukraine.
елементів цієї перемоги
One of the elements of this victory will be a successful judiciary reform, namely the creation of a new HQCJ. I'm convinced that the newly created HQCJ will be able to complete the qualification assessment in a quick and efficient manner, and by means of a selection, ensure a new quality of Ukrainian judges. Should I be appointed as a member of HQCJ, I promise to be consistent, efficient in my work that will ensure the implementation of the tasks set in front of HQCJ and the judiciary in general. When I was working at the US Congress Library, trying to discover some materials for my master's thesis, I came across this information.
city, not less but greater and more beautiful than it was transmitted to us. Один із варіантів перекладу українською.
So, one of the possible translations into Ukrainian, I will leave my fatherland behind me much better, in a much better state in which I have inherited it. That is why I believe in the activities of the new HQCJ, we should focus on the following. If somebody wants to abolish the law and somebody is going to violate the law, I will prevent that person from doing that. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your application to our selection commission in this process. That ends our interview, and with that, I will say goodbye, good luck, and stay safe.
Дякую. Дякую.
Thank you.